Riding the Bullet is about a psychological horror novella about a young man, Alan Parker, who hitchhikes across Maine to visit his mother after she suffers a heart attack. Along the way, he encounters a sinister driver who forces him into a terrifying choice. Alan Parker's restless life. Alan Parker was just another college kid at the University of Maine, trying to navigate art classes, dorm life, and the endless churn of self-doubt. He was 21, thin, with a pale complexion of someone who spent more time sketching in his notebooks than under the sun. Inside him, though, there was always a gnawing sense of incompleteness. He was fascinated by death, by the fragility of life, and this fascination colored his art. Dark sketches of gravestones, skeletal faces, twisted figures. Friends joked that he was morbid, but Alan couldn't help it. Death was the one subject that felt honest. Then came the phone call that would change everything. The call about his mother. It was a Thursday afternoon when Alan's roommate told him, "Your mom's in a hospital." The word struck like ice. His mother, Jean Parker, had raised him alone since his father left. She was tough, practical, and endlessly supportive. The thought of her lying in a hospital bed filled him with dread. Alan didn't own a car. The hospital was more than 100 miles away in Lewiston. There was no bus heading out at that hour, and waiting until the next day felt impossible. So Alan made a decision. He would hitchhike. People did it all the time in Maine. He told himself it would be fine. Just stick out your thumb, climb in and get there. But even then, in the pit of his stomach, something felt wrong. The first few rides were harmless enough. A middle-aged couple in a station wagon took him a few miles, chatting about the weather. A truck driver with bad breath carried him further, his cab filled with the stink of stale cigarettes. But with every mile, Alan grew more anxious. The road stretched long and lonely through the Maine woods. Darkness was coming, and the shadows pressed closer around him. That was when he saw the amusement park. Thrill Village, USA. The park was abandoned, its rides frozen in place like rusted skeletons. The Ferris wheel loomed against the sky, its seats swaying gently in the wind. Weeds grew through the cracks in the pavement, and the cheerful paint on the signs had peeled away, leaving only faded ghosts of color. Alan remembered the place vaguely from childhood. They called their biggest ride the Bullet, a massive roller coaster, painted red and white, that had terrified and thrilled kids in equal measure. Now it was silent, dead. Alan felt drawn inside, wandering among the ruins. And in the center of the park, he found the old coaster, the cars rusted but still sitting on the track like they were waiting. The Bullet. He climbed in without knowing why. The seat was cold, the safety bar creaked. For a moment, he imagined the ride roaring to life, dragging him through loops and dives. And then, in his mind or in truth, it did. Riding the Bullet, the coaster took him up into the night sky. The wind screamed in his ears, and Alan felt his stomach drop. He clutched the bar, heart pounding, certain this was no dream. Beside him, a voice whispered, "This is the ride you take before you die." He turned, but the seat was empty. The Bullet raced down the tracks, faster and faster, the world blurring. Alan screamed, the sound lost in the roar. And just as suddenly, it ended. He was back on the ground, standing beside the track, his legs trembling. The car sat still, silent. Alan staggered out of the park, shaken. He told himself it was a hallucination, just nerves about his mom. But part of him knew better. He had written something real, something that tasted like death. And the night was only beginning. The empty road. After leaving the eerie ruins of Thrill Village, Alan walked back to the highway, his nerves frayed. The night had fallen completely, the woods on either side whispering with unseen movement. His thumb trembled as he stuck it out for passing cars. Headlights glowed in the distance, then vanished without stopping. The road stretched endlessly. Alan's feet ached, his stomach churned. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the snap of a twig, set his heart racing. Then, finally, an old car slowed and pulled over. The ride with Ferris. It was a battered Mustang, paint peeling, headlights dim. The driver leaned across to push open the passenger door. "Need a lift?" the man asked. Alan climbed in, the seat springs groaning. The driver introduced himself as George Stahl, but said, "Call me Ferris." He was pale, with slick back hair and a faint smell of rock clinging to him. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Alan forced small talk. Ferris asked about school, about his mother, about where Alan was headed. His voice was casual, but his questions cut too deep, too precise. When Alan asked about him, Ferris chuckled. "Oh, I've been places. Rode the bullet once, you know." Alan froze. The words echoed like a curse. The realization. At first, Alan thought it was a coincidence. Just a ride name, just a memory. But then Ferris spoke again, his tone dropping. "You know what the bullet is, don't you? It's the ride you take before you die." Alan's blood ran cold. He looked at Ferris more closely. The gray tinge of his skin, the lifeless gleam in his eyes. Ferris wasn't just a man. He was dead. Alan's mind screamed to leap from the car, but his body was frozen. The bargain. Ferris grinned wider, his teeth too white in the dark. "I'll give you a choice, kid. That's what the bullet's about. One ride, one choice." Alan swallowed hard, throat dry. "What choice?" "You or your mother," Ferris said softly. "One keeps living. One takes the bullet. Who's it gonna be?" The air inside the car grew suffocating. Alan's heart hammered. He pictured his mother in her hospital bed, frail, but smiling. He pictured himself, his wasted potential, his loneliness, his fear. He thought of everything she had sacrificed for him, raising him alone. He thought of her future, empty if she died now. And in a trembling whisper, Alan answered, "Take me." The twist. Ferris laughed, a sound like dry leaves crunching. "You do that? Ride the bullet yourself." Alan nodded, tears stinging his eyes. "Yes, let her live." Ferris leaned closer, his breath cold against Alan's face. "Then you pass the test, kid. But remember, once you say it, you can't take it back." The car swerved suddenly, the headlights flickering. For a split second, Alan thought they were crashing, metal twisting, flames bursting. He screamed, and then the car was gone. Alan stood alone on the side of the road, trembling, gasping, the highway silent around him. The hospital, somehow, staggering and half delirious. He made it to Lewiston. The hospital lights glowed ahead like a beacon. He found his mother's room. She was alive, pale, tired, but smiling weakly when she saw him. "Alan," she whispered, "you came." Relief crashed over him. He sat by her bed, holding her hand, weeping silently. She was still here. She hadn't taken the bullet. The knowledge. But Alan knew the truth. Somewhere down the road, the ride still waited. Someday, he would climb into that seat for real. And when he did, there would be no getting off. For now, though, he clung to his mother's hand, grateful for one more borrowed day. The days after, Alan stayed by his mother's side through the night, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. Machines beeped softly. Nurses drifted in and out, but Alan hardly noticed. He couldn't shake the memory of Ferris's voice, the stench of his decayed skin, the way the car dissolved around him like smoke. By morning, Jean Parker was stronger. The doctors called her lucky. It had been a mild heart attack, caught in time. With rest, she'd recover. Alan forced a smile for her, but inside, he felt hollow. Lucky? Maybe. But he knew luck had nothing to do with it. He had chosen. He had given up his own future for hers, or at least promised to. And promises like that had weight. The shadow of the ride. Over the following weeks, Alan returned to campus, slipped back into the routines of classes, sketchbooks, cafeteria food. His friends noticed the change, though. He was quieter, distracted, haunted. At night, he dreamed of roller coasters, of rusted tracks stretching into darkness, of cars rattling upward toward a drop that never ended. Always, he sat beside an empty seat. Always, a voice whispered, "You or her, kid. Who takes the bullet?" He would wake drenched in sweat, clutching the bedsheets like a lifeline. The years that followed, life moved on. Alan graduated. His mother grew older, but her heart held strong. She lived long enough to see him make art shows, move apartments, even fall in and out of love. But Alan could never shake the feeling that he was living on borrowed time. Every success felt fragile, every joy temporary. In the mirror, he sometimes saw his own face pale and hollow, as if death were already sketching him into its gallery. Still, he kept going, because that's what she had wanted, for him to live. The reflection. Looking back years later, Alan wondered if it had really happened. The abandoned amusement park, the ghostly driver, the bargain. Was it all a hallucination brought on by stress, fear, and exhaustion? But deep down, he knew some things were too sharp, too vivid to be dreams. He had ridden the bullet. He had faced the question. And his answer had saved his mother's life. Final note. Alan never set foot on another roller coaster. The sight of them turned his stomach. The clatter of their tracks like nails in a coffin. But sometimes, passing a fairground or hearing the shriek of riders carried on the wind, he would pause and close his eyes, because he knew someday his turn would come. Someday, the bullet would call him back. And when it did, there would be no getting off.